All right, Motown Rundown. Today is Wednesday, March 13th. You can call this a State of the Union address. You can call this an emergency press conference. It's just me today, Ryan Rabinowitz. So if you don't like me or don't like what I have to say, usually this is not the podcast for you. I do have my good friend Trent Bally is behind the scenes in our little recording studio here. So if anything goes awry, he will jump in. And Trent, as you're listening to this, feel free to jump in at any time. No Ryan Collins today. He is out in the field as a working man. And I know that we have not, I don't think the three of us have been together in a couple of weeks here. So do not be mistaken. This is not a official Motown rundown, but for reasons that I will discuss here in a moment, I did feel compelled to hop on the microphone today and get some things off my chest. All is good. The podcast is not ending. Everyone is healthy. Everyone's in good spirits. But there are some things that need to be discussed. So, with that being said, next week we will all be back together. We will cover Lions free agency. We will talk about Detroit Tigers spring training. We might have a special guest, maybe we can hint at in the future here. We'll catch up on Pistons, not that you or anyone else really cares. But for today, in whatever you want to call this, we're going to talk Red Wings hockey here. And it's just me, and I'm going to put my hand up and preface all of this by saying, by no means, I did not play in the NHL. I am not an NHL analyst. You guys know me. I like to think that I do have some credibility when I talk about the sport and the game and this team. And I do not mean to shut out my two podcast partners here, but as they would tell you themselves, this is what I do here on this podcast. If there's anything of value that I bring to this show, it is talking about the Red Wings. And so I just felt compelled today on March 13th for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I did have a very nice, strong cup of coffee this morning that has continued. The effects have lasted throughout this afternoon to where I have a little bit of extra pep in my step and some juice today. In the circumstances under which now I would like to talk about this team and get some things off my chest. I listen to local sports talk radio pretty much every single day. There are certain people in that radio world that I like and respect, and others that I don't really care for. And no disrespect to anybody, but I don't necessarily think that we do a tremendous job in this city of covering the Red Wings. And I understand it because as far as the four major sports teams are concerned, as much as this is hockey town, for whatever reason, it seems like the team that gets the fewest calls and the fewest buzz on in the scope of sports talk radio in Detroit is the Red Wings. It is what it is. That's just the way it goes. And that's why, I encourage you, if you are a Red Wings fan and you want to listen to Red Wings news and updates and opinions, there's resources out there for you to use. I sound like I'm talking to like a gambling addict or an alcoholic, but there's resources that are accessible to you. And I do my best, and we do our best to make this podcast one of those things for you people out there, my friends, our friends that like to listen to Red Wings talk and want to talk about the team. So between listening to the radio today and these so-called experts that talk about the team and these fair weather fans that call in and whatnot, and of course the big thing today as we sit here again on Wednesday, March 13th, in the midst of a 6-game losing streak for this Red Wings team. The fight at practice today between Ben Sherrod and Lucas Raymond, the clip that's now caught on to the Spit and Chicklets of the world, and I'm sure will be discussed on podcasts and on national media and all these other things of the sky is falling for the Red Wings, the team is falling apart, and all the drama that comes with this. So again, whether you want to call it a State of the Union, whether you want to call it an emergency press conference, and I promise you I'll start talking about this team in a couple seconds here. And maybe I just got nothing better to do today, but I wanted to hop on here and have an open discussion and get my thoughts out, because in the midst of a playoff race, and that's exactly what this team is in, despite the fact that they've lost 6 in a row. They are in the midst of a playoff race. It's important to talk about our teams. And so I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes 2 hours talking about the Red Wings until I feel like I can move on and I have it off my chest and I can go to the gym and I can continue eating well today and take my pills and continue having a healthy day. And I think my therapist would appreciate the fact that I'm getting these things off my chest about this hockey team versus internalizing it and being irritable and whatnot. And but I digress. The Red Wings are amidst the 6-game losing streak, and I think for a lot of fans, and myself included, it has been a miserable, miserable 6 games to watch. And I find myself beating myself up a bit about the way I have approached this team because in many ways I feel like a fool. I feel like a fool because prior to the trade deadline and in the midst of the 6 or 7 game winning streak, which I think was the first 6-game winning streak since 2019 maybe, and now we are in the midst of the first 6-game losing streak since 2020, or maybe those years are flipped, but we are witnessing history here in these stretches that we haven't seen in a very long time. But I feel like I sold everyone up the river about this team and the team's credibility, and this team is different, and this is a team that's maybe not so much ready to compete for a Stanley Cup, but here comes your playoffs that you've been waiting for, and maybe we can even see this team win around. And that's, I guess it's the risk you take by being someone that talks about sports professionally at an amateur level, whatever it may be, that you are tasked with inserting your opinions and talking about teams and making predictions and saying bold things and not just always taking this middle ground. And sometimes those things can bite you in the ass. And there's a part of me that feels like that's what's happening here with this Red Wings team. I feel like I have let you down, the listener, and I have let myself down as someone that likes to think I know what I'm talking about, as this team has gone from, I don't know, 10 to 12 points up on the next closest team in the wild card to now you are dead even with one more game played with the New York Islanders as far as that last wild card spot. And so I'm trying not to beat myself up about it because that's just sports and that's just life. There's these ebbs and flows, and teams get hot, they cool off, they go on streaks, all these different things that make up how sports work. And I think that's an important thing that we come back to as Red Wings fans in just recognizing that these things happen. We can talk about history with this team, with other teams in the league. You can talk about the St. Louis Blues who won the Stanley Cup in 2019, who I will come back to later in the podcast, as a team that was in dead last place in this league in January and come, April, May, June makes a Stanley Cup run and wins the Stanley Cup in 2019. You can look at the fact that this team won 6 games in a row and now has lost 6 in a row. You can look at the New York Islanders as a team that I believe lost 4, 5, 6 in a row coming into Little Caesars Arena against the Red Wings, where they beat the Wings 5-3, and they have now won 5 or 6 games in a row themselves. Or I believe they might have lost the other night but have just picked up another win. I don't know, but that's sports, that's life, that's how things go. So there's a couple different ways I want to approach the Wings talk today. And I guess the first thing that needs to be talked about is what the hell has happened to this team? Because not only have they lost 6 in a row, but I would say that they have looked like a non-competitive hockey team and probably 4 out of the 6 games, 5 out of the 6 games. I'll go all the way back to the Islanders game back on February 29th. Happy leap year to all who celebrate. You're coming off a win against Washington 8-3 in dominating fashion, where we're all rejoicing and jumping in each other's arms. And what a great team. This team's going to make the playoffs, no doubt, whatever. You then see the Islanders at home. It's a big game because of the way the standings work out. The Islanders beat you 5-3 in a game that I would truly tell you, I feel like the Red Wings should have won that game and coulda, shoulda, woulda, but I feel like they were the better team in that game. I thought they played well. It was just one of those nights where you couldn't finish. The Islanders got some key goals at some key times, and you lose the game, whatever, you move on. And you knew the test that you had coming up back to back. You had two of the best teams in the NHL, in the Florida Panthers and the Colorado Avalanche. The Florida game, you dropped 4-0. And I think that was a game, and especially going into the trade deadline, that's a game that you look at and it's a real reality check of what this team is. The Florida Panthers, if you look at how good that team has been since the All-Star break last year, I probably should have the numbers for you, but they have truly been the most, if not one of the most dominant teams across the entire league as far as record, as far as goals per game, which I think is over 3.5, goals allowed, which is hovering right around 2.5, their power play percentage at like 25%, their penalty kill percentage at 80 to 85%. So they've been outstanding. And Paul Maurice has done a tremendous job with that team. A roster that I think coming into this season, not that this is a Florida Panthers podcast, but many people looked at as like, this is a team that's taking a step back just by default of a different look and a different feel to this team. They made a tremendous run last season, and we're a handful of games away from winning a Stanley Cup. But nonetheless, they've been the best team in the league. Let's just call a spade a spade. And I think you realize in a 4-0 loss that Florida is a team that plays faster than you. They play more physical. They're willing to go to the tough areas. They're willing to beat you up in front of your net, in front of their own net. They're willing to mix it up. They've got a couple guys that are real pricks to play against on that team. Matthew Tkachuk, Nick Cousins, to name two. And it's just a really good hockey team. And, you back that up with much better goaltending than you have. And that's the measuring stick. That is a true Stanley Cup contender, not a playoff contender, not a bubble team. That's a team that, in my opinion, will win the Stanley Cup this year. With the addition of Kyle Okposo, with the addition of Vladimir Tarasenko, two guys they did not have when you played them back on March 2nd. But with the additions they have made, that is a team that I believe will face the Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup final this year if the Colorado Avalanche don't get there. And I believe that the Florida Panthers have a very good shot, if not the best shot, of winning the Stanley Cup. So there's your measuring stick. You get pushed around, you get bullied a bit. I do think the Wings did a relatively decent job of answering the bell in terms of matching the physicality and the play style of Florida, but that's just not their game. They don't have the pieces, they don't have the talent, they don't have the depth, they don't have the jam that Florida plays with. And that's why you lose a game like that 4-0 on your home ice. Reality check, no worries, whatever. We move on to Colorado. And this is the first game you play without your captain, Dylan Larkin, who is going to be a completely separate topic of this State of the Union address, because it's worth talking about the importance of this player on this team. You go into Colorado, and there was a second there where you had a 2-1 lead in that game. And in Colorado was a team that made a bunch of moves at the deadline. There was no Bowen Byram in the lineup. There was no Ryan Johansson in the lineup. They had just acquired Casey Middlestat. They had just acquired Sean Walker from Philadelphia. None of which are playing in this game. So if there's ever a time in which Colorado is ripe for the picking in their own building, where they are the best team in the NHL in their own barn, this was the time to do it. Now, you're missing a key asset in Dylan Larkin. And as you've seen over these last handful of games, how sorely this team misses him. And again, I'll get into it more in a second. But if there's ever a time to beat this team, the time is now. You come out in that game and you're relatively competitive. I believe I'm trying to think of what point in the game the Wings were up 2-1. But you're in the game, and you played Colorado on home ice probably a week or two prior, where and Nathan McKinnon, as far as this Colorado team is concerned, that is just chock full of talent, who is probably the best player in the league right now in terms of just production. I mean, Connor McDavid obviously is otherworldly, but a tremendous year for Nathan MacKinnon. You hold him to a goal in that first game you play at home at Little Caesars Arena, and yeah, I mean, you still let him get on the score sheet, but compared to the 4-point plus 3 performance that he had against you on March 6th, pretty good. So you've shown that you can compete with this Avalanche team. And now we're looking at a situation where the common denominator that you're now missing in this next game is no Dylan Larkin. And again, I keep teasing it, but I'm going to continue to harp on this as I go through these games here. But now that first line for Colorado explodes. Mikko Rantanen, Arturi Lehkonen, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar gets involved in the offense a ton. And after you have the 2-1 lead, which now becomes 2-2, and then after that, it becomes a 7-2 game. It's another check yourself, look in the mirror. What's your identity? How good is this team really? And truly the final test before we get to the trade deadline. And I don't believe that we've talked about the trade deadline moves on this podcast yet. But nonetheless, you're now looking at Steve Yzerman and you're thinking, as all Red Wings fans do, because that's the one thing about this organization. If there's any organization that keeps their mouth shut and keeps their lips sealed as far as moves, what's going on internally, the Red Wings do it better than any team in this league, potentially better than any team in sports. So there's rumblings all week of what's the move. Are the Red Wings going to be big players in landing a guy like Noah Hanifin? Are they going to go land a Jacob Chychrun? Are they going to land a Jake Gensel? What is the MO for Steve Yzerman? And I was probably in the camp of, you're a top 5 scoring team in the league, and the priority does not have to be bolstering the forward group, which is contrary to what Derek Lalonde said in a press conference earlier this year, or maybe in just a one of his deals with Trevor Thompson between periods. But he mentioned the need for an additional forward, which we can come back to. But I would be more in the camp of, let's look to the defensive side of things, because that's a huge part of where this team lacks as far as just defending in their own zone, having a true defensive group that can contribute to the offense and that's just tough to play against, responsible with the puck, etc. So my answer to this was, I look at a guy like Jonathan Berggren, who is now up with the big club, who is an unrestricted free agent after this year. There were some weird reports that he had turned down a contract extension. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how happy Jonathan Berggren can be knowing that he's a 22, 23-year-old forward that played with the big club last year for many games, if not the whole season, and it was now sent back down to Grand Rapids. And granted, over a point per game player in the AHL this year. I think he was an AHL All-Star this year. And that's one of the things that Steve Yzerman likes to do with his more highly touted prospects. Not that you can call Jonathan Berggren a prospect anymore, but he wants these guys playing first-line minutes. He wants them playing special teams. He wants them playing in all situations. Versus if a guy like that is playing with the big club, you're probably not on the ice on the power play. You're probably not playing on the penalty kill. You're probably not playing 15 to 20 minutes a game. You're probably playing more like 8 to 10. So I get all of that. But I look at Jonathan Berggren as the perfect trade piece to move, as a guy that seemingly has been buried by other players in this organization or other guys that have been acquired by this team. Your Christian Fishers, your Daniel Sprongs, your Klim Kostin, who was eventually traded. We'll get to it. So that looks like a nice trade piece. The price for Noah Hanifin, I think there was a first involved in that deal, maybe a second and another draft pick or two. There was a really nothing prospect that was thrown in there, a defensive prospect. And he goes to Vegas. Jacob Chychrun stayed pat. I threw around the name Marcus Pettersson from Pittsburgh. He was not moved at the deadline. So that's what I'm kind of thinking going into the deadline. But is it inches closer and closer? And now you lose these 2 games. Steve Yzerman knows more than anyone, is a guy that can be a complete realist with this team. This Detroit Red Wings team is truly nowhere near the caliber of a Florida Panthers or Colorado Avalanche team. Nowhere near it. And if it wasn't evident in the 2 games you played against them without your captain, it was certainly evident in the loss to Arizona, the loss to Vegas, and the loss to Buffalo the other night. Or last night, I guess I should say, depending on when you're listening to this. So now my mindset starts to shift. All this talk about, do they move a David Perron? You know, they have a couple unrestricted free agents. Who else are they moving? Who are they extending? Because the only move that was made was the extension to Michael Rasmussen, who I believe was going to be a restricted free agent after this season. And we talked about that, and that's not really what I want to harp on here. So as time goes on, you start to think, okay, let's be realistic about this team. You're in a playoff spot. The team's been playing relatively well. You probably don't want to shake your core up. You don't have Dylan Larkin anymore. Does it really make sense to sell if you're in a playoff spot? That answer is no. Does it really make sense to buy if you know that your team is not good enough to win a Stanley Cup? That answer is probably no. So, as I'm someone that always feels like there should be moves, at least 1 or 2 moves to be made at a deadline, I guess I get the fact that Steve Yzerman looks at this team and goes, you know what? It's not worth us unloading assets while we're still a team that is probably, to say rebuilding is probably a stretch in year 5, but we're not quite there yet. And we can probably use these draft picks to acquire some more prospects that whether these guys play on this team or they get moved at a certain point, that's fine. And you know what? I'm not moving a David Perron, who's one of our captains and a veteran leader that provides these tangibles and intangibles that are very valuable to a team that's trying to make a playoff push. I get all that. The only move you make, you offload Klim Kostin for a 7th-round pick and redeems Simak, whatever his name is a defenseman that's going to give you depth in Grand Rapids. I believe he was the captain of the Barracuda in the AHL in San Jose's system. And I apologize for butchering his name. I said his name a million times a couple days ago. Really a nothing trade. I think his cap hit coming in is like 2.25 mil. I would have to imagine, is an unrestricted free agent after this season. I believe that Steve Yzerman feels it's important for Grand Rapids to have a solid team the same way the Red Wings do. And this is a guy that can come in and give your team depth. And if you do call up a Simon Edvinsson at some point, now you at least have this player to fill the gap. A leader, a veteran, great, all good things. But this means nothing for your NHL team. It means absolutely nothing. And the rationale behind the trade for Steve Yzerman is that he does not want to be paying a player $2 million, whatever Kostin's exact cap hit was, who was on the books for 1 more year. He didn't feel it was necessary to be paying someone that kind of money that was going to be out of the lineup. As a player that I believe was scratched in 8 straight games before getting to play the other night, and was then moved. I get it. Young player, and Steve Yzerman was very transparent about, look, this is a guy that wants to play. He's hungry to get minutes, and it just didn't work out here. All fine and well. It was a nothing trade to acquire Kostin. It's fine. Would I have liked to have seen him play more? I absolutely would have, because I do feel like that's a player that plays with that bit of sandpaper. He'll get in your face. He'll muck it up. Didn't provide a ton for you offensively. That's probably not really what you expected out of him anyway. But could he have gotten in the lineup a bit more? Sure. He's gone. Whatever. It is what it is. So now the thing that makes the most sense is to call up Berggren, which is what they've done. And I believe Jonathan Berggren has 2 more games of being eligible to be sent back down to the AHL without having to clear waivers. And I don't think I said that properly, but basically from the time he came up, He had 4 games to play, and if he played 4 games in the NHL, after that 4th game, he would then have to clear waivers to be sent back down. I think if he plays against Arizona tomorrow, the Wings are still able to send him down with no penalty, no waivers, no nothing. I do not anticipate that Jonathan Bergeron is being sent down. And I thought it was interesting that Steve Yzerman mentioned guys like Zach Aston Reese, who's playing in the AHL right now, who is I guess you could call him an NHL veteran, who maybe doesn't quite have the game that he used to, is a depth piece that he believes might be able to come up and add something of value to this team if needed. Do I foresee Bergeron being sent down for someone like that? I do not. But in the case of injury or an open roster spot, I mean, that could be a name that could legitimately come up, and a guy that plays with his hair on fire. I guess if you want to call him a grinder, I mean, I would probably use that term loosely with a guy like Zach Aston Reese. But a bottom 6 forward, a 4th line forward that has played at numerous NHL games in Pittsburgh, Toronto, and what have you. So whatever. So we move past the trade deadline, as I've now been rambling about that. Fine. All fine and good. I get it. The one thing, I guess, before we move on from the deadline, that I'm so disappointed that in Steve Yzerman's 45-minute press conference after the deadline, I'm so disappointed in the people that cover this team that nobody raised their hand and went, Steve, you just offloaded Klim Kostin because he's a guy that makes $2 million that doesn't get to play in the lineup. How do you not ask Steve Yzerman, hey, Steve, you've got another guy in a very similar situation in Justin Holl that has been scratched for 13 games in a row, that is making $3.5 million for the next 2 to 3 years on your team. How in the world do you make sense of having Justin Holl on your roster for the next 2 years beyond this year? That was, I wouldn't call it a big signing. That was a splash you made in free agency this summer. Justin Holl for 3 years, $3.4 million, and he hasn't seen the ice in 13 games. How do you justify that? And I would love to know what goes on behind the scenes. I would love to know, were you fielding calls for David Perron? Were you fielding calls for Jeff Petrie? Did you ask the question, hey, are you interested in Justin Holl? Would you like Ben Sherratt? I would love to know, because you've gotten yourself into a situation after just telling me you didn't want to pay a guy $2 million to sit on the bench. You're now paying a guy 3.4 to sit on the bench for the next 2 years after this year. And I got news for you. Even if you were to move a Petrie or a Sherratt, or if you don't bring back Shane Gostisbehere, which you should, I have no interest watching Justin Holl play. I love Steve Yzerman. I'm not going to sit here and say he's done a tremendous job. He would probably tell you firsthand, as I'm just jumping all over the board now, still wired on caffeine. He would probably tell you firsthand that this rebuild or retooling of this team has not been as clean cut, prim, proper as he would have liked. He probably would like to have Simon Edvinsson ready to play in the lineup right now. He would probably love nothing more than to be like, you know what, Marco Kasper, you've done a tremendous job elevating your game. Let's throw you back up with the big club and see what you can do. So I'm not holding this against him as far as, you know what, only 2 of your draft picks are playing with the big club right now. He's probably not happy about it either. And he's not blameless in this, but he's probably not happy about any of the situation. But that Justin Holl signing was the worst move that he has made by far in his tenure as GM. Between that and acquiring Jeff Petrie, 2 of the worst moves that have been made under his tenure. And he'd probably tell you that firsthand. But even with on the Justin Holl topic, which no one in that press conference spoke up about, if I'm Justin Holl, and he knows he's not good, everyone knows Justin Holl's not a very good player, to watch Jeff Petrie play night in and night out for this hockey team, Justin Hull's got to be looking around being like, what the fuck do I have to do to get a chance to play? And I know he played a couple nights ago because Bergeron wasn't up yet. But like, seriously, what do I have to do to get a chance to play over this bum? Jeff Petrie, on a night in, night out basis, is the worst player on the ice, bar none. Bar none. And again, as I'm jumping around here and I'm trying to get things back on track, Derek Lalonde is not blameless in any of this, too. I don't know how anyone on that coaching staff watches these games and can look me in the face and tell me, you know what, Ryan? Jeff Petrie's doing enough for us. He's contributing. He's played well. We don't see a need to not have him in the lineup. I don't know what dirt he has on who in the organization. I don't know if he's sleeping with someone. But the fact that he gets to play on a nightly basis is disgraceful to every person that buys tickets to watch this team, that spends their time watching TV to watch this team play. It's disgraceful. He's been horrible. And the Sherratt Petrie pairing, which thank God at practice this morning, they have finally broken the pairing up because that pairing was responsible for being a -4 on the first 4 goals last night against Buffalo. So there's your log jam at defense. And we can talk about roster construction and Simon Edmondson in a second as I'm still just rambling and going back and forth. But we move on from the Avalanche game. You go to Arizona. It's 90% Wings fan. My Uncle David and Aunt Lainey are at the game. Shout out. You are playing an Arizona Coyotes team that has lost half of their team to the trade market going into this game on the day of the trade deadline. Matt Dumba, gone. Troy Stetcher, gone. Jason Zucker, gone. In truly the worst organization in the National Hockey League by far. And you lose 4-0. And I was so excited to watch that game because I'm like, if there's ever a game for these guys to bounce back, this is the game. You can chalk this up. Here's your 6-1 win. Here's your 6-0 win. This game's over before it started. And silly me. You lose to Arizona. And now we start to kind of scratch our head a bit and go, wow. This back-to-back losing, these back-to-back losses against the top 2 teams in the NHL have now turned into you losing 4-0 to one of the worst teams in the NHL. Where do we go from here? But nonetheless, we play the next night in Vegas. You lose that one 5-3, and God, were you in that game? They played better. I thought they played a really nice game. I do. They tied it up late, 3-3. You almost immediately give that goal back, 4-3. They get the empty netter. I'm 99% sure it's an empty netter. And you lose 5-3. And now we're going, oh my God, what's going on with these guys? A 5-game losing streak. Everyone's on Twitter about the patch. They're 0-6 with the patch on the jerseys. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm a superstitious guy, but who knows? Who knows? The patch could have everything to do with it. And just to move along quickly before we talk about this team on a grander scale, now you go to Buffalo last night. And to Buffalo's credit, let me think of how I want to approach this. I look at this Buffalo game as the ultimate get-right game. Buffalo has been a franchise that has struggled to find an identity for what seems like a decade. I don't know when the last time they were in the playoffs were. It's been a while. They have rebuilt. They have rebuilt again. I don't know if you want to call them still in the midst of a rebuild, but nonetheless, a team that just flat out, you're better than. You should be better than. You've been better than them all year. You beat them earlier this year, 5-3 in their own barn, I believe. Not a team that it seems like the Wings do struggle against Buffalo for whatever reason, but this is the ultimate get-right game. You have Sunday off, Monday off. Let's reset. Let's go play on Tuesday. It's a homecoming game for Patrick Kane. This is it. Alex Lyon in net. Here we go. And when I tell you, this was the worst first period or worst period in general of Red Wings hockey I have seen in my entire life. To the fact where I tweeted, I went out and I tweeted, I will be telling my grandchildren about where I was when I watched that first period of that Red Wings game that might have set the franchise back 10 years. I mean, no heart, no hustle, lazy, slow, discombobulated, uninspired, unorganized, no urgency, whatever way you want to slice it. They were fucking awful. And I do apologize for swearing. And I don't want to be like that, but I don't know how else to express myself. They were fucking terrible. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the Ben Sherratt, Jeff Petrie pairing on the ice for all four goals against in that game in the first period, and no adjustment. No one gets sat. No one's getting benched. The pairings don't change. It's just whatever. Hey, Ben, Jeff, you guys are veterans. Go out there and get them. We trust you. I don't understand it at all. And the definition of insanity, as I always like to say this, and I did not come up with this, but I do like to tag it as my own. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. They continue to roll this pairing out there in the most ineffective offensive pairing, ineffective zone clearing pairing, ineffective defensive coverage, ineffective in clearing pucks, clearing the net front, being tough to play against in your own zone. Abysmal. And I don't know. And I'm not here to pick on these guys. And of course, both of them are much better hockey players than I ever was. I'm not here to pick on these guys. And I'm not here to question the content of their character or if they pay taxes on time or if they're in credit card debt or if they're good fathers. It has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with performance. And these guys have been terrible. And there's no repercussions. No repercussions whatsoever. And in this little skirmish today, and I'll come back to it, there's a million things I have to get back to. I don't know if any professional media people are listening to this, and they probably think I'm losing my mind. In some part, I am. But I'm just talking out loud. I'm rambling here. But there's no changes to be made. And the rest of that game, I mean, I guess you kind of try to sort of fight back, but like, what is being said in the locker room between periods? You have David Perron is an alternate captain who's been in the league for 10 plus years, Stanley Cup champion. Ben Sherratt, who's been in the league for, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. Andrew Kopp, 5 to 8 years in the league. These guys that are wearing patches on their jerseys with your captain that's out, and your captain's younger than all three of your alternate captains, what is being said in the locker room between periods? Because not only do you have the worst first period you've had all year and in the last 10 years, but you follow it up with the same bullshit, uninspired effort in period 2 and period 3. And Derek Lalonde's comments after the game about how, Trevor Thompson thankfully asked him, what's the message in the room? And, we got to stay positive. And, dude, how about going in there and flipping over a trash can? Because this is not the Red Wings of the Jeff Blashill era where I'm watching Franz Nielsen in The Ghost of Valtteri Filppula and Darren Helm on the first line with Richard Panik and Patrick Nemeth and Madison Bowie and half of that team who doesn't even play pro hockey anymore, losing 7-3 against Buffalo on a 6-game losing skid on pace to give themselves a chance at having a top 3 pick in the NHL draft. You're a team that was 10 to 12 points secured in a wild card spot, and you have now lost all momentum. Everyone has caught up to you, and there's no signs of this skid slowing down. Alex DeBrincat has been invisible. Patrick Kane has been invisible, and I get it. He's 35 years old with a fucking metal hip. Andrew Kopp, is there a worse way you can spend $5.5 million than Andrew Kopp? Seriously. I would have advised Steve Yzerman to go buy a timeshare in Turks and Caicos over spending that money on Andrew Kopp. What a useless waste of money he's been. Paying $5.5 million to a third-line center that doesn't even deserve to be on the ice, and you have the audacity to name him a captain at the lethargic Franklin the Tortoise pace that he plays at every night. Give me a break. What is said in the room? And I would hope that this altercation that happened on the ice today between Lucas Raymond and Ben Sherratt is probably Raymond looking at him going, what the fuck do you bring to our team? You call yourself a leader? You're horrible. You're horrible. That's what I hope the altercation was about. Because sometimes Lucas Raymond goes missing too, but he's almost a point per game guy this year. And I got news for you. He's what? 21 years old? 21 years old. Plays harder than half the roster, night in, night out. What a pathetic loss last night. And I know it sounds like I'm losing hope and I'm throwing in the towel. And this thing will get back on the tracks at some point. But it's just unacceptable. And I think all that Wings fans want to see is just somebody step up. Someone step up. Someone lay a hit. Someone drop the gloves. Someone stand up for a teammate. Someone put the team on your back and score. Someone lay down and block a shot. Someone break a stick over the boards. Maybe this was it this morning. Maybe that was the move this morning. A fight in skirmish in practice. And here's the comparison people want to draw. Oh, the St. Louis Blues, very shortly before their playoff run, there was a fight that went viral in practice. Great. If this team goes and wins the Stanley Cup because of this, by all means, go ahead, guys. And I think you're going to find out your answer tomorrow night at home against Arizona again of what this altercation was in practice. Because this is either going to be a season-defining game tomorrow where you can mail the season in. I got news for you. If they go out and lose this game to Arizona tomorrow night at home against a depleted Arizona roster that has quit on their season in your own barn after getting embarrassed by them 4-0 the other night, if you lose that game, there is no reason to watch the rest of the year. There's not. Now, I'd like to hope that's not the case. Because as with any sports, guys, there's ebbs and flows. There's winning streaks. There's losing streaks. I said this for months leading up to the trade deadline. It always feels like this team, and you kind of felt it with the Lions until you didn't. It always feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop of where does this losing streak come? Where is the stretch of 5 to 6 games that they look awful? And we are in the midst of it. This is not new. It's not new stuff we're dealing with here as Red Wings fans. It's just not. It happens every year. It's happened every year for the last 7 years or whenever it was since they last made the playoffs. Now, your 6-game winning streak was really nice. being in a solid wild card spot, pushing for the third spot in the Atlantic was really nice. That's a nice change of pace. But this is not new that we're doing right now, this losing skid. And I said it. Go back and listen to the episodes weeks ago. You're waiting for the shoe to drop. Where is it coming? And I didn't think it was coming this year because I thought this team was different, but I'm sadly mistaken. You lose your captain. Your goaltending catches up to you. This Alex Lyon story has been awesome. He has been tremendous for this team this year. As a guy that's making $900,000 a year and as a 31-year-old goalie who probably thought he was getting sent down at some point this year to be the starting goaltender ahead of Sebastian Cossa in Grand Rapids. What a surprise he's been, because Ville Husso, although he's hurt right now, got a little inside text that he might be back on the ice today at practice. I'm not sure. Ville Husso hasn't had a tremendous year. James Reimer, you're probably milking every bit of game as out of a 35-year-old goalie as you possibly can. The goaltending is far from where it needs to be. And I try to remain optimistic in the sense that Sebastian Cossa is a 6'8" monster and net, is having a great year in Grand Rapids. Trey Augustine, who you spent a second-round pick on last year, I believe was Big Ten Freshman of the Year, Goaltender of the Year, whatever at Michigan State. He has been tremendous for that team. I do think the future is bright for goaltending. But the problem is your goalies are going to be probably a year or two behind what you need them to be for a roster that's somewhat ready to compete. So your goaltending has completely caught up to you. And Alex Lyon has not been great in his last couple of games. James Reimer has done his best, hasn't been great. Your only hope, truly, is, and what I'm hoping for, is that Ville Husso comes back with a vengeance, with some time off, and goes, you know what? I'm taking this fucking net back. And he goes out and he stands on his head for you, and he gives this team some life, and the team can rally around it and move forward. That to me is what I'm clinging on to. I don't know what his timetable is to come back. I have no idea. I heard he was on the ice today, which is great. But to lean on Alex Lyon and then to look at him, the same guy that has gotten you to where you are at this point in the season, and then point the finger at him, like, what do you want? And maybe that situation is just a greater commentary on where we are with Wings fans, because your own head coach is in the media talking about how the team has overachieved. And maybe they have. Maybe they have overachieved. Have we all been duped? Is this team really that bad? I don't want to think so. And I don't think they are, because I watch this team play all the time. I see where this team gets their goal scoring from. The performances they've had in net. The nights where they've come back from down 2-3 goals. Like, I believe this team is different. But I will tell you what this team is not. And they are not a team that is very organized or competitive without their captain, Dylan Larkin. And I am more than happy to debate with people all day long about Dylan Larkin's not a number one center. I don't care what you think he is. I will tell you what he factually is a guy that plays a 200-foot game, a guy that's responsible in all three zones. Yes, he has been so turnover happy this year. He is not blameless for many of the goals that he has been on the ice for, goals against this season. I see it almost on a nightly basis. But Dylan Larkin has been through hell with this team. Someone sent me the other day a screenshot of an old line chart for this Red Wings team. And I should go pull it back up, but like the guys he was playing with on the first line, Darren Helm and Robbie Fabry. The corpse of Darren Helm and Robbie Fabry, who's now a mainstay fourth line winger on this Red Wings team. And people wanted to look at Dylan Larkin as he's the problem. He's not good enough. He's the reason why this team isn't over the edge. They need him to be better. Despite the fact that he's a point per game player, despite the fact that he plays on the power play and the penalty kill. And he's the first guy you send out when you need an extra attacker, if he's not already on the ice. He's the problem. He doesn't deserve to be the captain. Well, you know what? This team is lost without Dylan Larkin. So you can call him whatever you want. This team needs him. Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat need him. Because without him, Alex DeBrincat's been invisible. Patrick Kane hasn't been the same player because now Patrick Kane's looking around and going, really? Joe Veleno's my center? JT Compher's my center? I'm the best American-born player ever. These are the guys I have to try to set up, create for. And Joe Veleno, too. I love Joe Veleno, and he's due for a contract after this year. I was so excited when he had the opportunity to play with Kane and DeBrincat in the first two games in Larkin's absence, and they have now since moved him down the lineup as they probably had to. Very disappointing. His ineffectiveness on that top line. Very disappointing. And we'll see what happens with him. But the value of Dylan Larkin in this lineup cannot be overstated, understated, whatever. He's super fucking important to the team. And you see it in all phases of the game. And you see it in the urgency or lack thereof that this team plays with. Because Dylan Larkin goes 100 miles per hour every game, whether he's at an A-plus game or a C-minus game. One of my good friends put it best. If the Red Wings are a car, Dylan Engine is the engine. Dylan Larkin is the engine. It's been a long 45 minutes of this podcast. Dylan Larkin is the straw that stirs the drink. No, he's not Connor McDavid. No, he's not Nathan McKinnon. He doesn't have to be. Not every first-line center in the league is a world beater. Okay? But the first-line centers in the league are first-line centers because of a lot of the attributes that Dylan Larkin possesses. He's fast. He can defend. Yeah, he turns the puck over a good amount. I get it. Plays in all three zones. Plays on your special teams. Can log minutes. So, and that's not an excuse for why this team's been so bad. And that's why I'm just looking at the roster like, who's going to step up? Because this fan base does not deserve the pain of watching this team completely fall from the sky, flat on their face, and blow blow this playoff spot. They don't deserve it at all. So, and I got news for you too. I have reason to believe. I have very good reason to believe, and I'll leave it at that, that I don't know how soon Dylan Larkin's coming back. And I think you need to be prepared to play more than 2 weeks without him in the lineup. Because knowing Dylan Larkin, if it was an injury that he could play through, he'd be playing. And he's now missed what? 4 games? 5 games? So I hope I'm wrong based on things I've heard. I hope those things aren't true, but I would not be surprised if you missed him for more than 2 weeks. So you have to figure it out. And the unfortunate reality is you don't have anyone to go to. that's not already on your team. You've called up probably the only forward that's capable of playing in the NHL and making a difference in Jonathan Berggren, who really hasn't done much yet since he's been back up. A Zach Aston Reese, a Taro Hirose, Marco Kasper is not ready, so it seems. Those guys aren't going to make a huge difference. Defensively now, if we want to talk about roster construction, the bat signal is out for Simon Edvinsson, I suppose. But where is he supposed to play? You have 7 defensemen, and they've clearly shown you that they have no interest in sitting Justin Hall. I'm sorry, they have a plenty of interest in sitting Justin Hall. They have no interest in sitting Jeff Petrie. They have no interest in sitting Ben Sherratt to send a message. I think Oli Mata has been fine. You pay the guy $3 million a year. He's been more than fine for one more season. Shane Gostisbehere, I got news for you. No Shane Gostisbehere, and you can kiss your power play goodbye. He has been outstanding. Yeah, he's been kind of dog shit the last handful of games defensively. He's an offensive defenseman. That's his game. Jake Wallman, I tip my cap to you, sir, because you probably didn't think you were coming over here to play against Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen and the Connor McDavids of the world and the Sidney Crosbys of the world playing on the top unit with Mo Seider. And Mo Seider, I think he's a hell of a player. But right now, at 22 years old, he ain't a number one defenseman, and he doesn't have to be. But the solution is also not him playing with Jake Wallman on the first pair, which is why I would have liked to have seen a move for Noah Hannafin. Because maybe in some people's minds, Noah Hannafin's not a true number one defenseman. That's fine. But him and Mo Seider together on the first unit, it's a hell of a pair. And it's a hell of a lot better than what you have now. And bringing in a guy like that, you can slide a lot of guys down. Jake Wallman's maybe a bit more comfortable on the second pairing. And on the flip side, like with no Larkin, and you have to move everyone up a line, like some of these guys just can't hack it. Like, don't you think that Andrew Kopp making $5.5 million a year, like, don't you feel like that's a guy that could maybe fill in on the first line? Nope. They don't even give him a chance. He's not even playing on the second line. He can't. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if he's going through some shit. I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is for you guys. I don't know what the answer is. If there is ever a time that this team is due for a bounce back or needs a game, it's right here against Arizona. And when I approach this podcast, I said that I don't want to play, I think I said, I don't want to play the sky is falling game. And I don't want to look at this season being over or being like tremendously doom and gloom about what we're approaching here. Because in all reality, as of today, now granted, the New York Islanders have one less game played than you with the same amount of points. You would be in a wild card spot. This season is far from over. It's unfortunate because I'm not even excited to watch this game tomorrow because what does a win do for me? You beat Arizona at home. You should. You have to. It's a game you should win 10 times out of 10 if you're a team worth a shit. And I've said for a long time, like, I am not worried about these teams below the wings. I am focused on chasing Toronto. I want the third spot in the Atlantic. Well, I got news for you. They've got 10 more points than you in one less game played. They're 7-3 in their last 10. You're 4-6. Your goal right now should be to keep pace with Tampa. That's it. Tampa's got 2 more points than you. You're right in the mix. But the difference between you and Tampa, and I understand it's 2 completely different franchises. Tampa Bay went out and acquired assets at the deadline. They acquired Matt Dumba. They acquired Anthony Duclair. I'm probably missing a guy or two. They went out and got better. And they do that because they know that their window is closing, if it is not closed already. And those are moves they have to make to stay relevant, because the rebuild for Tampa is not going to be pretty. They have to sign Steven Stamkos after this season or the next season. They have a big decision to make with their captain. So we'll see what comes of that. But the season is not over. If anything, all this has done for you is add some drama to a seemingly drama-free season so far. This is sports. It's theater. I'm excited for the rest of the season. I will not be excited if they lose to Arizona. I will not be excited if they lose to Buffalo again. I'm not afraid of Washington with 69 points, who's right behind you, with a minus 27 goal differential. I'm not afraid of Buffalo, despite the fact they just kicked your ass. I'm not afraid of New Jersey. I'm not afraid of Pittsburgh. I'm just not. What I'm afraid of is that the Islanders are going to keep getting better, and you're going to keep sliding. And then we're looking at a team that is in the worst possible place you can be as a franchise. And that is, you almost made it. You were a point or two outside of the playoffs. And now not only are you not making the playoffs, but you don't really have great draft position. And that is not a place the Red Wings need to be right now, by any stretch of the imagination. I look at the Buffalo Sabres as a team that traded away Casey Middlestat, who has been in that organization for a pretty good amount of time now. I'm trying to think of who else they got rid of. I believe they traded Eric Johnson at the deadline, a veteran presence. And they traded away their captain. And this is how they've responded. They've won 2 in a row. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. And they're now, you know what? With 67 points, they're not out of it. They're not. Why can't they go win 6 in a row? That's a team that has rallied with their group, losing their captain, other guys stepping up, being leaders, taking their place. And Buffalo is a very, very interesting case study. And it's probably one of the last things I want to talk about here today before I kind of wrap things up. And I appreciate anyone and everyone that stuck with me to listen to this. It's a reason why I love doing this podcast. It's a reason why I started this podcast, is to have a medium to discuss. And I'm not right in everything that I say. I'm not wrong, but I'm not right in everything that I say. And I would love, as I take a quick break in the action here, I would love for anyone listening, shoot me a text, engage with us on social media, the Motown Rundown on Facebook, at Motown_Rundown on Twitter. You can look up the Motown Rundown on YouTube. This will be posted to the YouTube. This will be on Spotify. Please, I beg you, Wings fans, join in on the conversation. This is what this podcast is here for. It's not for me to sit here in my underwear and talk to the camera. It's good for me. It's therapeutic. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Where are you at with this team? Buffalo, to me, is such an interesting case study, because It feels like a team that has just been spinning their wheels and spinning their wheels and spinning their wheels time and time again, rebuilding. They kind of got something going, rebuilding again. Now they have another first overall pick. The Jack Eichel situation. But the thing that I believe irritates a lot of Red Wings fans, and that's really irritating for me too, Buffalo is a young team that has just completely pushed their chips in and been like, you know what? I think Buffalo's got the second or third youngest roster in the league. Tage Thompson's 26. Dylan Cousins is 23. Zach Benson is 18. Peyton Krebs is 23. JJ Peterka, 22. Rasmus Dahlin, 23. Bo Byram's 22. Owen Power is 21. Jack Quinn is 22. The list goes on. And the point I'm trying to make is that what is the difference between the Detroit Red Wings and the Buffalo Sabres right now? The Sabres have 67 points. You have 72. They just beat your ass 7-3. There's a very good chance that these two teams finish almost dead even with each other this year outside the playoffs again. Now, Buffalo's had some very, very dark days, and they've been rewarded with some very high draft picks. Rasmus Dahlin, number 1 overall pick. Owen Power, number 1 overall pick. But I look at the Buffalo Sabres as a team that truly is, and if you want to say is out of the rebuild, I will give that to you. But this is a team that is constructed with young talent that had the opportunity to play early as 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that were given the opportunity to play in the NHL and get a taste of what it was like to be a professional hockey player. And now they are reaping the rewards of it, and they will reap the rewards of what they've done for years and years to come. Devin Levi's 22 years old. He's gotten a taste of NHL action as a young goaltender. Where are these guys for the Wings? I understand that Steve Yzerman is cautious with his prospects. I understand there's a lot of things involved in terms of contracts and years of service and entry-level deals and restricted free agency and having to play that game. So you maximize your players on these cheap contracts. But at a certain point, it is so hard for me to sit here and stomach watching these consistent stopgap players that the Red Wings sign year after year after year after year. It's the same shit the Tigers do. Because our guys aren't ready yet. I got news for you. I don't give a shit. I don't care anymore. It would be one thing if this team was third in the Atlantic and I could look at you and go, you know what? You're right. If this team had Simon Edvinsson up, if this team had Marco Kasper up, if this team had Jonathan Berggren up, if they had Carter Mazur up, if they had Sebastian Kosa up, they would in no way, shape, or form be in the spot they're in. But I got news for you. All those guys I mentioned, maybe not all of them, I'm over-exaggerating a bit. What is the difference between those guys being in the lineup versus me watching Christian Fischer try to hang on to an NHL contract and Daniel Sprong trying to stay relevant in the NHL and Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie? What is the difference between me watching those young guys and the guys I just mentioned. Because I got news for you, you'd probably be in a very, very similar situation than you are right now. And I would be more interested in watching that roster play than watching a team that has quote unquote rebuilt and gone through a rebuild 5 years later, and you are the third oldest team in the league. So, what was the point? I know you had a lot of shitty contracts to get out from under, and you're out from under them. Maybe you're paying Justin Advocator for a couple more years. You're out from under them. You have 2 draft picks on this team right now that have been drafted by Steve Yzerman. Is it stubbornness? Is it proving a point? Are they trying to play the game that like the Pistons play of we're going to take a flyer on a guy that maybe just a change of scenery will be good for him, and worst case scenario we trade him at the deadline for assets. Well, I got news for you. You didn't fucking trade anyone for any assets worth a damn. What are they supposed to do? You have Justin Hole signed for 2 more years. You have Ben Sherratt signed for 2 more years. You have Jeff Petrie signed for another year. You have to bring back Shane Gostisbehere. Assuming the Red Wings bring back Shane Gostisbehere, there are 0 roster spots for Simon Edvinsson. So something's got to give. And I'm glad that they didn't extend Daniel Sprong yet, or Christian Fisher yet. Joe Veleno probably should. There was no extension given to David Perron because Steve Yzerman is going to have a hell of an offseason figuring out what makes this team competitive going forward. And truly, if they are going to go out and sign some more bums in free agency of these low risk, high reward contracts, I have no interest in it next year. No interest. And I would like to think that the method to the madness is just, hey, you know what? Simon Edvinsson is not quite ready, but I got news for you. By the time Jeff Petrie's contract expires, Simon Edvinsson will have room to be in the top 4. Great. I don't want to wait another year. Maybe they move someone this offseason. I don't know. But I get the frustration. I get the frustration because I don't know what the direction of this team is. And I don't know what the identity is. It's this waiting game. All these teams in the city of Detroit, it's like watching paint dry to wait for these players to come up and make an impact, man. Come on. What are we waiting for? Why is this the only city in America that has to have that their fan base has to watch their prospects rot? And I got to hear these names year after year after year. And what am I waiting for? Is this it? Is this better than the alternative, Wings fans? Is what you're watching better than watching your young players play in the NHL right now? If this team misses the playoffs, are you going to give a shit that you didn't, that this is the roster that was put together? Are you going to be upset? I'm not going to be angry. I am angry. Well, what am I trying to say even? Are you going to be upset that we didn't have to watch these young guys? Like, this is where we're at. This is where this team's at. Missed the playoffs, but what? But what? We didn't get to watch anyone exciting this year. What was the most exciting part of this year for you? Patrick Kane? Sure. Great. He'll be 36 next year. If you're going to end up missing the playoffs anyway, wouldn't you rather have done it watching some homegrown prospects? Again, I get it. You can't let guys play that aren't ready. And it does more good for certain players to play in all situations with the AHL team. But this is horrifying to watch. They're lost without Dylan Larkin. So I've been all over the place. I've rambled a lot. I've gotten worked up. I've taken some deep breaths. I don't know if anyone's really gotten anything out of this, but you have an opportunity to make the playoffs here. And someone's got to step up and care and act like they give a shit. Because without your captain, no one's done that. And I got to be honest with you, too. Derek Lalonde, sure, he's a good guy. I mean, yeah, the team plays a bit with a bit more structure. I would give you that. They've had some really, really nice games. They had a nice win streak. Other than that, man, what am I getting out of you? Do these guys even like playing for them? I remember seeing something. I don't know who they were getting interviewed by, but like Mo Seider was getting interviewed, and Derek Lalonde spoke right before him about how this team doesn't have any real superstars. And Mo Seider was like, "We think we got some pretty good players on this team." Who says shit like that? And wherever his comments were today or the other day of, we're lacking center depth. Isn't that what this team is built on? Depth. That's what Steve Yzerman said he liked about your team. Depth. So for you to now come out and go, we're lacking center depth, whose fault is that? You could have acquired a second line center. You could call someone up. You can fucking bench someone who sucks on your team, who doesn't provide anything, who's been a waste of money. So I don't know. I don't know how players respond and what they think of Derek Lalonde when he makes comments like that. But maybe it's enough of the talk of the coach speak of, we got to play more structured and it's the slow start. Just how about getting in there and fucking throw a stick. Throw a stick. Hold someone accountable. Why don't you take accountability for how bad this team has been? They're not even playing hard. They don't even play hard. They don't skate. They don't try. It's not fair. It's not fair to the fan base to blow it and to shit down your leg. Does Patrick Kane ever speak up in the room? Holy shit. I don't know. They got Arizona tomorrow. I'm going to learn everything I need to know about this team and the rest of the season tomorrow night. I am. What's the excuse not to win that game and win it big? I'm not talking about dragging a team to overtime. Because at a certain point, too, regulation wins count in a tiebreaker. So, I don't know, guys. We'll find out everything we need to know about this team tomorrow. What did this skirmish in practice do for your team? Did it galvanize the group? Is it two guys going at each other because they're pissed off with how bad they've been? And they're looking to turn things around? And they're scrapping and playing hard and okay, yeah, let's fucking go, Razor. Attaboy. Yeah, I hear you. I gotta be better. Let's go win this. Or is it, fuck you, I can't stand this guy. What kind of team are you? And who wants to step up and lead the charge? That's my question. Red Wings and Coyotes tomorrow night at 7. We'll get Trent and Collins back in the mix next week. I appreciate those two guys for letting me come on here and talk. I don't want to exclude them from the conversation, but both of those guys have better things to do than to sit here and talk about the Red Wings for an hour and a half today, like I just had to do. I thought it was going to be a 30-minute ordeal here. And I apologize to those of you If anyone's even made it this far, if you don't want to listen to the Red Wings talk and you were hoping for a full-blown Motown rundown, sorry, all Wings talk today. Because you got guys fighting at practice. No one on the radio knows what they're talking about. No one that calls in knows what they're talking about. No one has a pulse on this team. They've lost 6 in a row. They might miss a playoff, and the sky's falling. Well, I got news for you. It's a beautiful day here in Michigan, 65 degrees and sunny. And as of right now, they're still fighting for a playoff spot. So enjoy the ride. And we have every right to complain and bitch about this team at the end of the season if they don't make the playoffs, because something's got to give. But I got news for you guys that call into 97.1. It's firing Steve Yzerman the answer? Really? I probably lean more on the side of defending him more than I should, but Steve Yzerman's going to be here as long as he wants to be here. We can't even get this ownership group to finish building the district that we were promised in 2017. You think they're going to fire the most legendary player, one of the most legendary players in NHL and franchise history? Are you fucking kidding me? That's your answer? How about some accountability on the players? Seriously, you think Steve Yzerman likes watching this shit? You think he likes watching guys like Andrew Kopp go out there and go out for a skate? And Jeff Petrie try to hold on to his NHL career? You think he enjoys that? Think he enjoys watching his starting goaltender get pulled after the first period in Buffalo? Fuck no, he doesn't. He'd probably love to watch Simon Edmondson play every night with this team. And if he thought he was ready, he'd be up here playing. And he will be soon. So you guys fucking have another fucking drink, you guys that think Steve Yzerman's getting fired anytime soon. Jesus. At Motown_Rundown on Twitter. Motown Rundown Facebook page. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. I beg you, work with me here, so I don't have to sit here and do another one of these hour-long soliloquies about the direction of this team. Red Wings and Yotes, Little Caesars Arena tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Figure it the fuck out. We'll see you next week.